All right. So knowing that, I'm going to kick it off to our presenters.
Great. Thank you so much for everybody who's here tonight. Thank you for being here. My name is Liz Soller, and I work with the language learning team for DC Public Schools, which is world language and dual language programs. We provide support centrally for our world and dual language programs.
And hello, bienvenidos. My name is Catarina Brito. I also work with the language learning team. I'm a former kindergarten and first grade bilingual teacher, and very happy to be here this evening and have a conversation with those of you whose children are in dual language or thinking about dual language.
So go ahead, Katarina.
Okay, so we thought, first of all, we should clarify what dual language is in our world here. So in dual language programs, students learn a lot of their grade level content in two languages, and they learn to read in two languages. So if your child is in a dual language program, they may be learning math in Spanish and science in English, but they would be learning to read in both languages. And the expectation is that if your child enters a dual language program in the early years, in pre-K or kindergarten, that by the time your child leaves elementary school in 5th grade, they should be able to read and write and speak with close to 5th grade fluency in two languages.
And so, excuse me, our dual language programs in DCPS are located at these schools. And the schools that say Strand next to them, for those schools, there's an English only option as well as the bilingual program. And if you don't see your family's school or your child's school listed here, and you are curious about that, please feel free to put your question in the chat. You're certainly welcome to stay.
And also, I just wanted to mention that although we will be speaking specifically about how to support children who are in dual language programs, DCPS has many English programs that also support children who are learning English as a new language. So a lot of the strategies that we talk about here apply whether your child is in dual language or learning a new language in a non-dual language program.
So we wanted to start by just acknowledging the gift that you're giving your child by having them learn in multiple languages. I'm going to go ahead and read the quote, which says, "One of the greatest gifts you can give your child is the gift of 2 or more languages. Being bilingual is good for your child's brain, makes communication with grandparents and relatives easier, and is an advantage for finding jobs in the future." Now, this was written from the lens of, having that students are learning a language that their grandparents and relatives also speak. And so, because we're adapting this quote for students who are also learning a second language at school that their grandparents may not speak, that's a little bit of a nuance. But this website, Colorín Colorado, has a lot of resources on supporting your language learners at home. And although it was written primarily through the lens of supporting English learners, a lot of the ideas and tools can apply to students who are learning, for example, Spanish as a second language in their schools. And it's a bilingual website. So we wanted to kick us off with that celebration of you having your child and becoming multilingual. We have a small group, which is really nice, and we want to make sure that we're curious to know what questions you are hoping to have answered before we start officially this session. If we aren't able to answer your question in this session, we can certainly follow up with you, but we're really curious to know what brought you here tonight and what burning question do you have that you're hoping to get answered.
So if you could go into the chat and write your question down, that would be great. I think you're not able to come off mute, right?
I just changed the settings so you participants can unmute themselves.
Okay, thank you. Y si hablan español, estamos preguntando, ¿qué preguntas tienen ustedes? ¿Qué quieren saber ustedes para nosotras asegurar de que estamos respondiendo a las preguntas que tienen ustedes?
Okay, we had one question come in the chat.
Mhm.
The question is, what resources are available at the library besides books, like digital resources?
Okay.
Excellent. Okay. We will get to that.
Any other questions? No question is too big or too small.
Hi, have a quick question. I guess what I would like to know, it's my household is already a bilingual household, but my child prefers English because English is everywhere. So she is learning to read English sight words, but she's not transferring that, I guess the sounds of the letters, right, to the Spanish. So I was wondering if you have any resources of like Spanish reading.
Hmm.
And how old is your child, just so we'll know?
Pre-K 4 going to kinder.
Okay.
Is she in a bilingual program?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay. Should we move on and respond to those
Yes.
as
Yep, sounds good.
Okay.
So one of the questions, oh, Katerina, sorry, you go ahead.
Okay, sorry. So one of the most foundational things that we wanted to share is the importance of creating a language-rich home. And in particular, just explaining that whatever listening, speaking, reading, writing you do with your child at home in your home language is going to benefit your child in their new language as well. And Liz, did you want to add specifics about?
I was just going to give some examples. So, I mean, this is a question that we get most often. It's like, well, how am I going to help my child at home if I don't speak the target language? And so we really want you to walk away understanding that creating a foundation in any language is going to support your student in acquiring more languages. So we encourage you to, if you are bilingual, of course, using both languages in the home. But if you speak one language and your child is learning the other language at school, it is extremely valuable to continue to have conversations, rich conversations with your child in your most fluent language, to read to them in that language, to have them practice writing, whether it's making shopping lists or labeling things around the house, listening to the radio, to podcasts, to music. All of these are enriching experiences that will open doors for your student in making connections to all of the languages that they're learning.
And also, you can make a bridge to the learning in the new language that's happening at the school. So, if your child were in a Mandarin and English bilingual program and you didn't speak Mandarin at home, you can still say, tell me what you're reading in your Mandarin class. What are you learning about? What new words have you learned? Because that communicates to kids that you value their bilingual learning, and it gets them motivated to retell what they've been learning and to think about what they've been learning and put into practice some of their new language.
So these are just some ideas, some examples of specific things that you can do to create a language-rich home. So for example, playing rhyming games and singing songs together. Rhyming is a really important foundational skill for later when students are learning to read. So don't want to underestimate the power of doing that in either language. Encouraging your child to write, having an array of print materials, whether they're from the library or, checked out from school, subscriptions to magazines. I know so much is digital these days, but whatever print materials you have. I love, that there are free libraries too everywhere now. That helps too with getting different books in and out of the house for the children. And then encouraging your child to tell stories and you telling stories. And encouraging their vocabulary development again in your most familiar language, naming objects, modeling pronunciation and clarity, and helping your child learn to put names and words to the environment, both inside of the house and outside. And so again, we just really want to emphasize that regardless of what language your child is speaking and interacting with most at home, building a strong foundation in that home language will benefit your child in learning a new language.
So we also recognize that in addition to having a language-rich home, there are ways that you can connect your child's learning at home with what's happening in the school. I'm speaking from experience. Both of my kids were in dual language programs in DCPS and also in California. And some of the things that we recommend is, for example, establishing a homework buddy. If your school doesn't have a system for setting up homework buddies, you can go talk to your child's teacher and request that they help you determine who would be a good homework buddy. This is so that if your child is bringing home homework that they need a little bit more help with, and you are not quite sure what the directions are because you maybe don't read that language yet, that they would know who they could call to get some guidance on how to complete the homework in their new language. There are also many online translation tools like Google Translate or mylanguages.org that you could copy directions from homework and put it in and get the directions translated to a language that's more comfortable for you. We really encourage you to partner with other families for activities. Sometimes it may feel a little funny, like approaching a family in your child's class if you don't feel comfortable speaking that language, but it's a really, really powerful tool for your child. They're very motivated to use their new language with their peers. And so planning a fun activity, a picnic or a meeting in the park or hanging out at the playground together after school in a sort of intentional way can be a really powerful way to get your child to use the language. And when you do meet with your child's teachers, most likely in dual language, they will probably have two teachers, a Spanish teacher and an English teacher. And we want to remind you, make sure that you ask both teachers to meet with both teachers or to meet with the two teachers together and get a real clear picture on how your child is doing in English and in Spanish. You can ask, how is my child's reading coming along in Spanish or in English? And then you can ask also, is that appropriate growth? Is this what's to be expected? Because children do grow a little differently in their first language and in their second language. So it's good for you to have that conversation with the teachers who are working with your child. And you can also check in with your teachers about the homework. If homework is too difficult for your child to complete, let your teachers know, because homework is supposed to be a reinforcement of what they have already learned. Homework should be able to be done by your child independently, although, you know, any of us who have kids know that that's not always the case. So your teacher wants your child to be successful. Don't hesitate to check in on that. And for the parent who is asking about resources to support their child who is starting to do some reading in English, but is not yet doing reading in Spanish, I would similarly say, ask your teacher if there's some resources that either could be borrowed or online resources that can be recommended. There are a number of online libraries like Reading A to Z, which parents can sign up for. Many have free membership for families, and there you would be able to get some downloadable books that at different levels that you could use to help encourage those skills your child has learned in one language be applied to another language. Liz, do you have any other recommendations for online resources that
GetEpic.com
Epic is another
has, you can get a free parent account, and then I think you get a free trial, and then you can upgrade, but they have books in Spanish and English, and they have read to me books where your child can click on the button and a voice will read the book to your child in that language of the book. So that's a nice one. Imagine Espanol as they get older and into next year, but not for pre-K 4. We don't have a student-facing program for that. But I would also say too, give your child some time and to get more formal instruction in both languages, and trust that they are going to make those transfers across languages eventually.
Yeah.
So one of the wonderful things about living in Washington, D.C. is that it is such a multilingual city, and there are tons of free resources available. I forgot to mention, so Planet Word, for example, is a new museum that opened that is all about language and language learning. But these 4 links are some of the ones that we wanted to highlight to give you ideas of places you can go to in the city for different events and also for resources. And you'll notice the DC Library on the bottom right corner. Someone was asking in the beginning about what resources are available from the library in addition to just books. And at this website, you can see lots of different resources that are available in Spanish. You want to say more about that, Katarina?
They have actually in the past, I don't know if it has changed in the recent sort of pandemic years, but they've actually had Spanish language homework help where kids could call in, and there's a homework line. And so in the past, they've had both Spanish and English speaking people working the homework line. So a number of students have found that helpful. But I just also wanted to encourage you to ask when you are planning an outing, if you plan an outing with your family. For example, the planetarium in Rock Creek Park, they have visits that are meant for young children that are in English, and then they also offer them in Spanish. So if your child is learning Spanish as a new language, it would be great to take them to something as engaging as their planetarium experience and do it in Spanish. And vice versa, if your child is learning English, it'd be great to have them have that experience in English. So don't be afraid to ask when you're looking at museums or any of the thousands of community resources we have here. What have you got available for Spanish learning children?
We have a specific question, and I was wondering if you guys have a resource that could help this family. The question is, what if my child is a late reader in English and started reading both at the same time, like Spanish and in English, and is mixing them now together? So they might mix in a little bit of English, now a little bit of Spanish. Is that something like common? Is it natural? Is it normal?
Yes.
Are there resources that can help me with that?
I mean, yes, yes, and yes. It's natural, it's normal, it's good. When children are learning two languages, one thing that we recognize is young children generally focus on making meaning. And as they start to learn two languages, they use both of their languages to make meaning. So that might be with reading or with writing or with speaking. And it's not like, oh, they speak English, 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 and then they stop and all of a sudden they speak Spanish, Spanish. You will get this this translanguaging, it's called. It's when children are at the stage where they start to mix their languages, and it's a natural part of becoming bilingual. Depending on how young the child is, you know, if they're very young, they may not realize they're doing it. You know, they might just say, oh, vamos a ir al school porque quiero ver a mis friends. You know, they have mixing languages in a way that's comfortable for them. If they're a little older and they're reading and mixing, again, they want to get meaning across, or, you know, writing, say. So they might write, me gusta el gato black, you know, because they can't remember a particular word. All of that is nothing to be worried about. And, you know, you just want to encourage your child to have as many reading and writing experiences as possible. But as they get older, you might want to encourage them, like, oh, you know, yeah, me gusta el gato black. How would we say black in Spanish, you know? And like encourage them to start to make that transition towards more in, you know, like only Spanish reading or writing, or only English reading or writing, and less mixing. But in the early years, it's just something to encourage. And you can even say, oh, I love how you're using both languages. And, you know, if I said it in English, this is how I would say it. Or if, you know, if Abuela said it in Spanish, this is how she would say it.
How about like on the other end of that, where I believe a family asked earlier that they're already living in a bilingual household, but the child is not transferring their knowledge from what they know in English to Spanish.
Yeah. English is a very powerful language in our community. And children from bilingual households and children from Spanish-speaking households and children from English-speaking households hear much more English than they do Spanish in the community. This is one reason why, you know, on this particular slide, we're encouraging people, get out there, take advantage. You know, we're really lucky to live where we are, and we can create a Spanish-rich environment and activities for our kids to participate in. I think, well, there are two things I'm thinking about. This particular child might be in, we do have a dual language school where the early childhood class is only in English. So it's possible that this child hasn't had a lot of academic exposure to Spanish yet, in which case I would say, really don't worry. Once they start kindergarten, they would be getting Spanish and English instruction. Or it might be a child who just thinks, you know, is just more comfortable using the English because of their background or their exposure to the language. In either case, I think really rewarding the child and calling out when they, when they use Spanish. If they're using more English than Spanish and you want them to use Spanish, really rewarding them. And children love to play teacher, saying like, boy, I don't know how to say this in Spanish. Can you help me say this in Spanish? And let them feel like the power that comes from being bilingual.
Thank you. Right, so let's keep taking some more questions. If anyone in the audience has any questions, you can enter them in the chat, or you can also unmute yourself and share your question. As people like who are in the call like think about their questions, we did have a question come in the pre-registration. The question was about how do you know that your child is benefiting from dual language if they're struggling both in English and in Spanish in their academic work?
That's a really good question. So I would say, first and foremost, I want to encourage if the person is here who has a question, I would encourage you to meet with your school leader and teachers and get more information about what what the situation is as far as how what you're seeing at home, how is it showing up at school. But it happens if you are having difficulty in a certain skill area. For example, if you're struggling with writing, you might be struggling with writing in both languages, and it might be showing up in both languages. The instruction in two languages, a lot of times families are concerned that their child will get confused, or if they're struggling in one, then how are they going to do okay in the other? And really, our teachers use strategies to make the content accessible in both languages. So, for example, using visual supports and visual anchors to help students remember, helping students identify the key words in a sentence that they're trying to understand, and in a bilingual school, making connections between those keywords and the words in the partner language, so that you're reinforcing the language across both settings. But in the same way that you might struggle, with certain tasks or discrete skills, it can show up in both languages. And so really what you need to get to the core of is where is the challenge showing up, or where are the challenges showing up? Is my child understanding the directions? Do they need to hear the directions repeated? Do they need to have a more quiet space to work in on their assignments? Do they need there are all sorts of different supports that we can try with our students in order to see in both languages, like what's going to help them do better. And so, I definitely understand as a parent, it can be concerning if your child is struggling at school. And it doesn't mean that if they were only learning in one language, they wouldn't still be struggling. And it doesn't mean that they're not still benefiting from the program. I think it's important to keep in mind that students learning in two languages, it's not going to hold them back. It is a tool for acceleration and enrichment that can help your children move forward. But it doesn't mean there won't be some bumps in the road. And so trying those different supports in both languages can be really helpful to creating, an environment where your student is more successful.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Does anyone else have any other questions whoever is in the call? No other questions. All right. So that is that was the one question that came in through the pre-registration. As we close up, is there anything what would be like the one golden tip that you would give to parents who have children in dual language programs for this summer?
For the summer, I would say definitely, taking advantage of the free resources that we mentioned. There's so much fun stuff happening around the city, and partnering up with other families in your child's school can be a great way to stay in touch. Even, there are things they can do like, writing letters back and forth in either language with their friends. I know everything is digital these days, but I'm old school. I like letters and stamps, but even, writing, I guess, emails and texts in both languages, staying engaged in learning the language through music and, fun cultural activities is a great way to keep students' interest up. Getting books from the library, finding out from your child's school what programs they'll still have access to on Clever over the summer, because our licenses are for a full year. So we do have various licenses in Spanish, whether it's through their math, their science, or Spanish language arts. And so definitely ask your teachers which ones they recommend and how many times a week, because that's another resource that's already available to you through your school. Katerina, you want to add some?
No, that was perfect.
And most importantly, have fun.
I was going to say that was the only thing I was going to say. Don't only work, like have a fun, language rich summer if possible.
Yes.
Well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. Thank you for sharing all the resources and the different tips. And thank you for the families who are here.